Simultaneous sounds good. Anybody here who doesn't speak English?
Maybe some.
There you go.
Yeah.
You all right? Anybody here who doesn't speak English? I think they heard me. All right, good. I talk quite fast, but you have translation if you want.
Welcome to everyone to this special festival talk with the acclaimed director Tarsem Singh, Dhandwar. Thank you for being here with us today.
My pleasure.
Well, I'm sure you have a lot of questions, but I want to start by asking some of myself because I've already told him, but he's one of my favorite directors because he had such a prolific career. He's such a prolific filmmaker, working across different forms and genres, including music videos, commercials, mainstream studio films, TV series, and especially two very highly celebrated films globally that have received a cult status now.
Not by critics,
Turkey.
not by critics, but yes.
I'm a critic.
There's always an exception.
So, yeah, he has a huge following in Turkey as well, especially with The South from 2000 and The Fall from 2006. And this year, we're very happy to host him with his latest film, Dear Jassi, which will be screened right after this talk at Atlas Cinemas. So,
if you've not seen it, please come.
We'll be there.
It's a bit hardcore and a different style. So if you like Haneke and some Iranian films, it's kind of a bit undefinable, but quite hardcore. So if you'd like to come, please do.
It is a very special story, and as such, he treats it with such care and compassion, and really pays respect to the individuals who were involved in the film, in the story of the film, actually. But I want to start from the beginning.
Okay.
Well, you were born in India. And then, as far as I know, you moved to Iran when you were 3 years old.
Yes, I think I was conceived in Afghanistan because my father used to work for Haryana Airlines, and then he started working for Iran Airlines. So I was in a boarding school in the Himalayas since I was 6 years old.
That's fascinating. A boarding school in Himalayas.
It sounds romantic to you. It's just was a bunch of rocks that kept us away from our parents. We hated it. But now when I go there, I realize what a special place we were in. So, but every year,
what was it like there?
Every time it was snowed in the winter, we went to Iran. So otherwise, you were 9 months without your parents, so we hated it. But after about 11 or 12, after about 4 or 5 years of crying, I think we were baptized by fire. You could throw me anywhere in the world. I was just like, what can I eat? Who can I sleep with? What movie can I watch? And I was okay.
Wonderful. But it actually appears in the mind as a shot from one of your movies.
Okay.
It's like a boarding school in Himalaya. So, but were you traveling back and forth India quite much, or?
Just 9 months you had to stay in school because we only had one group of holidays. That's when it snowed. When it snowed, they sent us home and we went to Iran.
Because your visual style, including everything you've done so far, I'm a huge fan of some of your commercials as well, I have to say, especially when I'm working with advertising students. The Swimmer is my all-time favorite.
My first commercial. It's been downhill since, because you're talking about my early films, the early ad, and yes.
I'm coming.
No, you're right.
But you started from the top.
Yes.
The Levi's
Only ways
commercial,
down.
Swimmer, and you just kept exploring and exploring around it. But you have such a striking visual style. So I was wondering, how much do you owe that to your Indian background, your American filmmaking education, and how you combine those things?
I think it's kind of hard to define, because I would just say if you can kind of define where you get your references from, then it becomes, you're probably just cheating. I mean, the cliche story goes, the originality is the art of concealing your source. And my sources were just from a different background to most of the people I was making the commercials for. So I was only scared one time for a commercial that I was doing, and that was 20 years later when I went back to India to do a commercial. Because when I went abroad, it's what's happened all the time in advertising. When the Scots, the Ridley and Tony and all came to, let's say, LA, then you come from London, and they were like, oh my God, palm trees, how beautiful. And anybody goes from LA to London, they'll go, oh, Cobble Street, so they find that romantic, and you look at it with a different eye. But when you go back to your home, can you look at it with a romantic eye when you want to sell something? So for me, I was seeing America with a completely different eye, so that the translation of that is perceived as original. But if I told you where it came from, you'll be able to see very clearly what I steal from.
But when you decided to study cinema, filmmaking, how was your family's reaction?
Well, I think, with any Indians, you're lawyer, doctor, engineer, or asshole. They just don't have another category. So it is very hard. And I saw a book in India. I saw a film festival that just shocked me as I wanted to do. I just wonder if I can do films. And then I saw a book. It was in an embassy, and it said Guide to Film Schools in America. And it just shocked me and changed my life, because I just thought, you go to college to study something that you hate and your parents love. And then suddenly I was just, it was like, for me, it was like how to sleep with blondes 101. I said, I'm there. So I had to figure out how to get there. So I told my dad, and he just said because every year he used to work in the airline, we had free tickets. So he just said, you're not going abroad because you will run away. So he cut off all my going abroad, and I went to India and I got a degree in commerce. I lied and cheated, never went to college, just hung out with a whole bunch of junkies that were in literature major, and they had a much bigger influence on me. And then I went from there to just somehow figured out I had a scholarship to go to Harvard. Again, not me sitting for the paper. I went out there and switched to film, and my father just said, if you don't go to the other university, you don't exist anymore. So he just cut me off, but I had $1,600 and a one-way ticket. I chose Los Angeles because I knew one person in America, and he was in Los Angeles. If he was in Albuquerque, I would have gone there. I ended up in LA, and then just went to film school, and every school turned me down. And then I lied and cheated and went under a different name, made an ID that was local, because city colleges are free for Americans, but they were expensive for this thing. So I had 3 jobs, but I lied and got an ID on another person's name. I just attended classes, because I still do believe that a film degree is worth toilet paper. But the degree, the education that you get from school is incredible. So I wanted to go for the classes, but I didn't care about the degree. So under a different name, I got that. And from that little film, I got a scholarship. And then I was good. So the first commercial I did out of school was Swimmer. And the first video I did, still in school, was Losing My Religion. So it's been downhill since that time.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Did you make up with your father afterwards?
Not really. Later on I found out, because he had a laundromat, and later on I found out that he was talking very fondly of me. But it was okay. I mean, for my mother, I was always God. I mean, like if you're an Indian, your firstborn is like he can do no wrong. So for me, the mother, it was fine. Just the dad, you're always a failure.
Yeah, but deep in his heart, he knew, and he was probably very proud.
No, I don't think he could. I don't think he could come, because he was an engineer, and he believed very much old school that you work hard, that's how you make. And he just thought that I wasn't working hard, because I worked very hard to get through college. But when I came out, I remember there was a job that was supposed to happen. That if you're a commercials director, they booked it, and 24 hours later they had to cancel it. And in those 24 hours, I made more money than my father did working for an engineer for 35 years on a night shift and day shift. So he just could not equate the two things, but I think in the end, when I hear the stories, he was okay with it in the end.
Yeah. And then, how did The Cell come about?
The Cell was a strange one, because for me, I always said the first film I want to make, I was looking at the form. But then in the end, I ended up, I think, about 23 years of location scouting and shooting commercials in those areas, and about maybe 9 years of casting. I just was there, when it happens, it happens. So I was doing all these things, and then suddenly the Cell thing came along, and I just thought, like, okay, let's see if it'll go anywhere. And then it happened like that. And I just said, do we make it? Do we not make it? And I just said, okay, let's make it. And then, since you like The Cell, it's okay. If you look at it, it was apart from, and I'm always okay with that, because the stuff of mine never goes past 50% on tomato meter, which is still rotten, because they always, and I'm okay with that, because people love it or hate it. It's when they say comme ci comme ça, I'm terrified of that.
People love it on Letterboxd.
On?
Letterboxd.
What is that?
Letterboxd is the new Rotten Tomatoes. It's
I will join it immediately if they like my film.
You have to come to Letterboxd.
Okay, letterboxd.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the thing is, with the cell, we were so amazed because I think so many things came together all at the same time. The idea was very original, going into the mind of a serial killer who is in a deep coma and trying to find the location of the last victim. And
I had no interest in the structure of that, because I was kind of obsessed with serial killers 10 years before that. And my neighbor and friend Fincher that time did, when Silence of the Lambs came out, we just thought, okay, walk away. We thought hopefully the serial killer phenomenon will die. But it didn't. And he did 7, and everybody's saying, why is Fincher doing a serial killer film? I said, I bet you he's got a take on it. So when The Cell came along, everybody was saying, why are you doing another? And Fincher was saying, like, I bet you he's got a take on it. So for me, the only reason I was making it because it was a blank canvas. You went inside ahead of somebody. So if serial killer is what got me the budget, I was like, okay, that's the envelope. Because if it was, Hollywood has phases. Like right now, it tends to be something that unrelatable for me, but they're doing incredibly well. All the Marvel and all those films, I don't know how to do them. So for me, when I looked at that, if it was 70s, the film would have been about some burning building, because disaster movies were always in. If there was a disaster, and the reason I would have made it is because on the 18th floor there is somebody having a dream. I would have gone for that. The studio would have said, oh, there's a burning building? Yes. So in this one, they were like, serial killer? Yes. And so I went in there and I just thought, inside the head, you leave it to me? They said, yes. So there were about 20 pages. In the end, the script, when we got it down, it was about 20 pages. Because it was just a structure. And I said, when you go in the head, you can't really write for a visual person. I had to embrace it and say, okay, this is what I will make. And it was very ballsy of them to say, go ahead. Because when they had, I would talk to the writer and say, what's happening? Because there were little stages. And it would be like, when he goes in a corridor, there's 50 mothers of us saying, what have you done with my son? And I would like, okay, what are you trying to say? So I had it down to 5 lines in each place. She goes in, she sees, the first one, she goes in, she sees the boy. The boy takes her to the victims. Something scary happens. The victim takes her to the bad guy, and he scares her. She comes out. Second time, she goes in, goes sees his childhood abuse, sees something, he traps her. Then the FBI guy. So I had it 3 lines. And I just said, it's okay. The eye candy, it's my job. I always say when I'm in advertising, my job is to polish the shit. So I go in and I go like, I can do that. So just leave it alone. And it was very ballsy of them to say like, go ahead. I didn't think so. I was thinking, why are they not letting me do everything I want? And now I saw the movie after 15 years last week. And I was like, they gave me a lot of control for a first film. But I was a hell of a drama queen then.
I think they were very smart.
Well, I hope so, because they made money off of it. But when we made the film and showed it to them, they didn't think it was going to do well at all. It is only at the last week they realized, because Venice and everything came, and they just said, oh, we like the film there, can they come? And they were like, this film? Oh, we have some other films. They said, no, not this, just this one. And then they kind of realized, so in the last week, they tried to put in a lot of advertising. But it did well financially. But they didn't really think they had a hit on their hands.
That's one of the things that still amazes me, that the studio people still doubt about such things and are quite cautious about taking risk on really creative people. Because most of the time, when you find the right creative people, it really pays.
But the key word there is right. And they were bitten so badly by great filmmakers in the 70s that they drove studios bankrupt. And I don't look at this thing as a show business. It's a business show. So if you want to screw people over, you might get one chance and then not do it again. I was thinking of this as a much longer range, so I tried to be responsible. So for me, I don't blame them. The thing is, it's much easier for them to say no than it is to say yes, because they hear pitch after pitch after pitch from people. And then the moment they say yes, they're committed for the next 3 years, and your career could be over as long as them. So they have to be very careful where they go for it. We had a school teacher, actually it was a substitute teacher, who one time came in class and he just said like, I'm sure you all have nobody's seen this film. It's called, and he named the film, and I just said, I've seen it. He said, oh, you must have come from the third world, because it was such a shitty little film that they couldn't sell it anywhere. They just threw it to India and everything. And it was such a horrible film. It's called The Car. And he said, all I can tell you is my experience with the studio. He said, I had gone to pitch, and it was the time when I said, because we could get it in one line. He said, I said the pitch, and the person was, he wanted to sign a check and buy. Immediately he dropped his pen. And the idea, he said, was one line, because 70s, car chases were in and devil movies were in. You know, Exorcist and everything. And he said the pitch was, he said, okay, so the movie is the devil in the car. And the guy was like, oh yes. And it was this. So after that, it went nowhere. And there's only one thing harder than making a movie, is getting a bad movie, stopping a bad movie from being made when it starts. It's a very heavy train. If you push it and it gains momentum, it's unstoppable. So then everybody criticized those guys, like, how couldn't you see how shit this was or how that was? And it's impossible to stop because the schedules and everything is committed. The risk has already been distributed and they go ahead. So it's much harder to stop a bad movie once it starts.
But once you have a great idea and you really want to follow it, sometimes miracles happen, like The Fall.
Well, that one, I'll tell you what, at the end of The Fall, when I would do it in a heartbeat again. It took me all those years to make The Fall. And when I made it, in literally at the last, I told my brother, because I told you, it took 23 years location. For 28 years I had the idea, 23 years location, then one for looking for the girl. And when I saw the girl, I told him, okay, and I had a really personal problem that time. My girlfriend had left me and I was like completely disoriented. And I just said to my brother, sell everything. We're going to go around the world and make this film. So I made it, like, it was 28 years of waiting, and then we did it I told him in 3 months, she's a different person. We make the movie right now. And I told him, just sell everything. I don't care about the cash, but if you're going to sell the house, then call me. So after 4 years when I finished, I called him and I just said, I think the movie's almost finished. He said, the house is up for sale. I said, the movie's finished. So
keep the house.
That was it. I survived only with the house. And then of course we took it out. Nobody wanted to buy it. Then I worked for another 2 years to see if I could put it in 12 cinemas in America. And some people on the international bought it. And I am only shocked because apparently it got released in Turkey. Because the people who saw it out here, I was shocked. Because all the time I would hear that and I would just go like, where did you see it? And they would just say, in a cinema. And I was like, wow, I really lucked out. So that took another 2 years of working.
Because it's a film that really should be seen in a movie theater.
Yes, you mean not on a small iPhone with the Chinese...
Yes, it's a big screen.
No.
I agree with you, but then it wasn't in my control.
It's still so visually striking.
I knew when I made it that it was what I would call predated. That when you see a film like that, you go like, this looks a little naive, it looks a little dated. But you see it 20, 30 years later and everything around it dates. And that looks exactly the same because there's no kind of effects and nothing like that on it. So I knew that when I was making it, that this will be it. But I didn't realize that the reception would be that bad that we were giving it for free and nobody would take it. Then I just put it out myself.
One of the things that is really striking after all these years is that it also has a very special heart in it. You know, it's not just the visual world that really affects us. You know,
it does if you bite the pill. If you take the license that I'm trying to ask for, and apparently for 50% of the people it didn't work at all, and they get really thoroughly bored in it, and they get started these things. And I knew how to make that a commercial film. I remember when Dan Gilroy, the third writer, came on. He just said, you can solve this in 2 seconds. If you set up the ticking clock up front, you know, the old Hitchcock thing that you just put a bomb under the table. If they're going to talk, that will make the whole film industry. I said, no, what I want it to be is it's a girl who's bored. So you think the movie is about eye candy and just nothing. And then after the first act, you realize, oh, he has an agenda. And he just says, if you want to make it commercial, put his agenda up front. And I decided no.
It was your own baby.
It was, yeah, I drowned it, but yes, that was it. So nobody wanted it, but then it's great, 20 plus years later, and it's now suddenly finding an audience.
So shall we give the good news?
Oh yes, but I'm not allowed to say which festival. So this year, the movie is going to be released again.
The Fall.
So, I think the Turkish people can still see it here and there, but the problem is in the rest of the world, they just go on some bad Chinese sites, and that's the way they've been watching it. So again, another Turkish man that I love, Efe, from Movie, they are taking it and putting it out. So it'll be this year that hopefully you all get to see it.
Movie is quite popular among cinephiles in Turkey, so...
Good. I know Movie, I don't know, what is it called, Matchbox?
Letterboxd.
Okay, I will remember that one.
We'll get you an account.
Don't
worry. So, but for The Fall, you also had David Fincher, Spike Jonze, all these guys.
No, they only came in the end because when nobody would buy it, the critics didn't like it. I mean, the older critics, like apart from Ebert. So it took a lot of critics to hate it. Then for the thing is, I think I would call you a young critic. So all the people who grew up after that, who saw the movie without seeing those guys' reviews, embraced it. And now it's kind of come out that I think the younger, it's finally going up on the tomato meter after 20 years because they've become critics, and thank God the old critics have started dying. So their numbers are going down, and so I'm kind of glad. So I think it's because of people like you and the younger generation that see it without the bias of, and that was a very strong bias also for the cell, that Jennifer Lopez was a pop star. So when people were going to see a pop star film, they were like, oh, we came to see this, la 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 film. And then the film was a bit too violent and graphic for them. And it went, like they were like all reacting to it like that. So when they were telling me like, you don't have the license to make this kind of a film because it's so fantasy, but we came to see Jennifer Lopez. And I'm just as a psychiatrist. And my thing was that my idea was, I thought it was clear. If you say Jennifer Lopez is a psychiatrist, it's a fucking fantasy film. So for me, that was it, but apparently it wasn't enough.
Well, it was working. I think you really helped jumpstart her career as an actress. I think it was the first film I took her seriously.
No, there's the film that she did with Soderbergh before that I loved. And that's, yes, I had seen that, but it didn't do commercially that well or anything. That's when I thought she would be perfect for it. Because originally I thought, like I wanted Julianne Moore. But then they told me, you can have Julianne Moore and your budget is $3. And I was like, okay, no. What do I have to do? Then they were describing like I said, you need a diva. Then you need somebody like Jennifer Lopez. They said, yes. I said, no, not Jennifer, somebody like, yes. I said, okay, you want Jennifer? Okay, I'll go and see. So that was it. They just wanted that. And they were to a certain extent right, because that got me the budget. And then I got to make the film I wanted to make.
Yeah, so...
sorry for the swearing, I'll try to stop it.
So after The Fall, which was released in 2006, you made several different sorts of projects. You worked for the studios, The Immortals, Mirror Mirror, which I love dearly as well. Yeah, and I think she's the best villain, Julia Roberts, in that, and Selfless. And then you also made The Emerald City, which was kind of a remake of Wizard of Oz, in a totally. So how were all these experiences added up?
Well, I kind of have a day job. I love advertising, and most people used to do music videos so they could do advertising. They do advertising so they can do films. And when I was doing music videos, I did not want to do advertising. When I was doing advertising, I did not want to do films. And that's where I met Fincher, because he wanted to come over to see if I wanted to have a company with him. I told him no, because I will do this for another 10 years before I want to attempt a film. And he was saying, he said, why? And I just said, I'm kind of just learning how to make film look the way I want. He said, no, your stuff looks amazing. I said, no, that's because I think most of other people's stuff looks crap. So it makes it look better, but I want to go, this is my school. So I worked for 10 years, and I love it. And I got to do the kind of ads which most people don't really see around the globe. They're quite different. And I loved it. It was a really good sharpening teeth for me. And in between, I had films and other projects that would come in. And now the advertising has become a lot less creative for me. So then I'm now looking at...
You've done everything.
I have, and with great budgets. So now I'm looking at it and just thinking, okay, maybe do more films, and in a different style. That's why Dear Jassi is kind of like much more, Haneke meets some Iranian filmmaker.
Yeah, now I want to come to that.
Okay.
After all these years, you've decided to go back to your homeland, India, and shoot a real life story, which is a really tragic story. It's a love story, like in the sense of Romeo and Juliet, and so yeah, of course Romeo and Juliet never ends well, so it goes in a similar way, but it's so real. And even though you've shot it in a quite realistic style, the culture of India is so colorful, the people, the music, the joy, it almost, you can feel it, you can touch it when you're watching the film from the big screen.
Thank you.
So how did you come across this story? Did it stay with you? I mean, did you have the idea of making a film from the very beginning? Or?
Just when I was about to start The Fall, and again, people say it takes you that long to make a movie. I said no. You come across an incident, it doesn't go out. It just stays in the back of your head. Then something would happen and it became happy. So I had that 23 years ago. I heard about this mother's telephone call to the kidnappers of her daughter, and she said these words. And I just said, okay, there has to be a film there, and I would reverse engineer a film where how that is never but it can be believable. It's never understandable, never sympathetic why she would say that, but to make it believable. So I reverse engineered from that one, had it in the back of my mind. So I told my brother, we make this movie immediately, or we wait for like 20 years when it becomes retro. So he goes, okay, but it might become like The Fall, which we were waiting forever on. And then he just said, we might be like two guys with a lot of money from advertising that are always talking about a movie that they never make. And then The Fall happened immediately. And then all the money was gone. I had nothing to do, so I was back in advertising it. Like, lovely. And then the two other films came along, and they were in a different style altogether, but I still got to put my DNA in it. So I just said, good, I will make it.
And when did you start working on this project?
On this project, it was kind of after, I would say, what do you call it, COVID, and it happened immediately, because these guys wanted me to come and do a Bollywood film in India, Bakao Films, and I just said, like, if you want, I have a film, I will do commercial cinema, but I have a take of this particular film, and I just thought they would never call back. And they just said, we want to be in business with you, what will it take? So I said, okay. I told the writer the story, this structure, they got a writer on. And then COVID hit, and the guy he's a very spiritual guy, which I'm not. I've been an atheist since I was like 11. So he went off into a hotel, and he says that her spirit just came into him, and he wrote it in one go. So he gave me the script, and I just said, that's the exact structure I asked for, it's great, I want to make it. Only, I want to take out 40% of the movie, the front and the back, because he was into their childhood and what happened since, and I just said, no, I will think of a way to put it in there. And then I got to play it enough, I got to make the exact film I wanted to. But kind of like The Fall now, nobody's buying it. So it's just sitting there, so maybe in another 20 years it becomes a cult film. But let's see.
Well, unfortunately,
so if you guys get a chance, go see it. And if you like it, write something about it. If you don't like it, just don't write anything.
Well, unfortunately, the topic of the film is not retro at all. But what is usually called in several places around the world as honor killings is still a phenomenon in India. I'm not sure.
It is everywhere. It's not a religious problem, it's a cultural problem. And if you can, especially, this is Turkey, but if you have any English-speaking journalists, I advise them to take that word out. Because it's quite a horrible word to add the word honor about killing your daughter or your sister or anything. It doesn't, in India you don't have that word, but somehow translated in the West they put, and the West is great at nomenclature. If you're naming things, they will, if a bomb falls
here,
in a school,
a little orientalist.
No, but they're good at words, but this is the wrong word they've chosen for it, because if a bomb drops in a school, you call it collateral damage as opposed to kids dying and all that, and somehow it's acceptable. And whereas in the East, the word honor does not exist in that killing of your child or anything, and somehow in the West, because it makes those people have a leg to stand on, to say like, oh yeah, I did an honor killing. No, there's nothing honorable about killing your child or your sister. And I don't think it's a religious problem, I think it's a cultural problem.
It is very cultural, and it also reveals all these structures that in a way justifies or tries to justify how parents or the families try to dominate the lives of young people, really, push them to the edges. And so, but at the same time, they're so sweet. The young
they are amazing.
lovers.
If you fall in love with the actors, you're in for a very bad heartbreak. So you just come and cry
along.
But
you make us fall in love with them.
Yes.
You're guilty of that.
Well,
can I ask you about these young actors?
It was the same thing for The Fall. That the idea was that first you think it's about the visuals, then you realize there is an agenda. And if you have swallowed that pill, then, so you needed the license. Somehow my DNA seems to be closer to Turkey, that most people here seem to swallow the pill of, like I thought, J-Lo as a psychiatrist, I've already got the license to do whatever I want. Apparently not, but the Turkish people took it. So in The Fall, it was just about a particular visual thing, and then the license was given. And I think requiring a license, and especially when you're doing something international, is very difficult for an international license. Because if you look at Hollywood films, if they'll make Batman or if they recycle Superman or anything, there is a problem. After they do the first one, doesn't do that much, it doesn't make that much money, because you have to establish, the reason he can fly is from a different planet. The reason he can do this thing, so you set up those rules and your 1.5 hours is always over. So then they make it. Then you've got the license now. Then the second and third and fourth make money. But in India, in Hindi movies, you don't need that license. The reason he's going on a horse and when you shoot him with a gun, he will reflect the thing with his ring and kill the other because he's Amitabh Bachchan. You don't need a license. So for me, those are the licenses that you look for a multicultural place. And for the different world, they're different. So somehow, For Turkey, my licenses seem to have worked. So for me, for this particular film, the idea not to go to the tragedy, but first make you fall in love with the lovers. And then, to use the old cliche from Groucho Marx, that you first let the audience outguess you and then you pull the rug. And then you double cross them. So I kind of believe in that, but I think a friend of mine who's also a director, Mark Romanek, said very strongly that he said you need to set up like where this film is going, other people will be very angry with you. And to a certain extent he's right with Dear Jassi. So because when people come in a festival, there's no trailer, there is no nothing, they kind of think, oh, Romeo and Juliet, and then they come in by the end, they're like, ah, oh, like that. So I'm trying to give a heads up, please come.
So it's a pre-warning, but it's really worth it. I mean, we are confronted by these stories over and over again. And I think it's really special that you put that out there for everyone to see. Let's
hope somebody buys it. If they don't, it'll probably go into limbo, but at least for the fall, I owned it. So after 20 years now, FA and like a movie and all want it, I can at least interface. This one, if it disappears, I don't think it'll ever come out.
How did it feel going back to your homeland and making a film there after having worked all over the world?
It's much better now. About 20 plus years ago when I used to do commercials or even films out there, it was very difficult because my crew was white, everything is there, and every time you go there, the problems were too difficult. You'd go there and every problem would just come to me. They'd say, where should I park the trucks? Where? I said, like, I'm the director, go ask that person. They said, but he's white. And I go, yes, but he works for me, go ask him. And they didn't understand the hierarchy. But now when I went out there, it's all worked out. They all know who does what at a job. It was just the smoothest, loveliest shoot to have.
And the industry in India is immense. It's huge.
For commercial cinema.
Yes.
Yes. Big difference.
Big difference, right? Yeah.
And people asked, would I make a commercial story of this? And I kind of went like, not really sure I want to do that. So I was much more taken with, like, keep saying, if Gaspar Noé or Haneke wrote a script and one of the Iranian women directed it, you'd get this. That's the only thing I told the writer. I just said, that's the tone. That we're going to shoot it very objectively, and I need to find the real deal with the actors.
How did you find the young actors? They're so amazing.
They are. Well, they haven't seen the movie, so I don't know what to say, but yes, they are. Anybody seen the movie? Okay, then I'll go ahead. It was difficult because for me, when you're making a local film, I grew up near that area. So I know how they speak. I know, as I was saying, I know how the cow shit smells there. And I know in Canada, that part, I also went out there to do farm work. So I knew the two places at that particular time. So I was just saying that we can't have any known actors or actresses. So after some particular time when first I found a girl, then the girl's parents just freaked out and she was gone. Then they couldn't find an actor, and then I found a sportsman who I just said, well, played. I just said, the only way we can save him is keep him away from actors. So I just took all actors out from that, and then I found the girl through some Bhangra dancing groups and everything. I just said, I don't care if they're not active. I mean, I figured if I could do it with Katinka in the fall, if I get my control, I would be able to make it work. So I did it with them out there, and then I shot the movie to a certain extent, like the fall, 90% I just shot in sequence. But the same, because if they're not actors, they can at least see where the story is going. And if they're professional or theater actors, they know how to mix it up.
You put some background as to the cultural identity of Mithu, the boy.
Mithu, yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned a little bit within the film, like how it was difficult for Sikhs in Punjab in the 1990s, I think.
Yeah.
Could you open it a little bit, maybe for our audiences who will be watching the film, because we're not really
I think
familiar
it's not
with that
necessary.
history.
It was just basically he came from, because the writer had a whole bunch of his childhood, and I just said that's not important. For me, it's two people, like, Romeo and Juliet will work if they're rich and poor, black and white, different cultures, whatever. So I just said, she's from abroad, she has a green card, she has everything, he doesn't have anything, that's enough. It's more of an economic problem. So I was interested in that story starting from there. If I went into his childhood, he had a tough childhood, but then again, who hasn't? So I was okay with that. But his was a lot more violent. And now it just went worse and worse. So I just said, leave it there, but the writer. So it looks like you do agree with the writer, and he was probably right. But the movie is already 2 hours, 6 minutes long. It would have gotten much longer. And I I thought, like,
the teacher mentions those things, so it's
yes,
quite informative.
It is.
Yeah,
it is just at that particular time with the Sikhs, there was a lot of government problem because they were asking for a separate state. And it was just a political problem, and he was caught up in it and then couldn't finish his education and doesn't know how to read or write. So that's the background, and that's why I just leave it as that atmosphere and just say they come from different cultures or different backgrounds.
Okay, so before we move on to questions from our audience today, I also want to ask you something particular. I told you about in the fall, there is a bit that was shot here in Turkey, in Istanbul. Yes. So I want to ask you about that scene.
Okay, first let me ask, how many people here have seen The Fall? Okay, so I'm preaching to the choir. It is one of my most loveliest experiences. And is she here? Meena, are you here? No. Okay, she's coming for the film. Okay, then you'll miss it. I remember this incident as one of the most incredible. First of all, I love Turkish women. And this woman just rocked my world. I met her in Cannes in a festival, and she just said, if you ever want to shoot in Turkey, come. And I just said, okay, then I'm shooting The Fall everywhere. And there was a scene, if you guys remember, when all the bad guys, they get hung up. They're hanging as a chandelier. I found a church in Prague I was shooting, because I was shooting for another 4 years, because I shot the movie and then I was finding the backgrounds of each character and kind of reverse engineering it and making their backgrounds. So I just said, oh, if his brother and his whole gang was hung in a chandelier, I like that image. I got to shoot a church in Prague. Then I just thought, when you look down from there, it needs to be something magnificent that he sees, and then he's going to turn the story dark because she's thinking he's about to free them. Then suddenly he realizes that, oh, she pulled the wrong toe, that she's just lying. And then he just kills the characters who he's about to introduce as heroes. So I just thought I needed something grand there. And I was there, and I remember this woman's telephone number. So we called her and I just said, hey, can we shoot in this thing? She says, and I had 1 day. And I was going to America, and I said, can we shoot in, Turkey? She says, yes, where? I said, Hagia Sophia. She says, when? I said, tomorrow. And she said, and of course, we have no money. She says, okay, go. I said, I want to come tomorrow. She had 1 day. So she said, go to the Turkish embassy tomorrow and tell them they will be expecting you and you will come here as a reporter. I said, okay. I went to the embassy. They gave me the visa the next day. I came here. I think we landed at about 2 o'clock at night, and basically she said you can shoot until the sun comes up, which was about 7 o'clock or maybe 8 o'clock, and then the Hagia Sophia opens up again. So I said, okay. So we go out there, and all I wanted to shoot was these guys coming in. If you guys remember the story, they come in and they see the bodies. So I wanted to shoot the reverse, but I didn't even think how I will get that shot. I just wanted to get in there. So we went to sleep at 2 o'clock, got up at 4 o'clock, and then of course we had the clothes. She got me 6 guys, we dressed them up as the bandits. And of course, the black guy, the white guy, didn't really matter, they're that small. So I just said, okay, we go out there to shoot, and in the middle of Hagia Sophia, where I wanted to shoot, is the biggest scaffolding in the world, because they were repairing the top. And I just went like, oh my God, I thought, oh my God, it's perfect. I only needed to climb up there to shoot down. So I shot the guys running, 3 shots, and then wherever there was the Arabic written, I think it's probably Allahu Akbar or whatever is written, I just said I would change that, because it's very simple shots to shoot. So I shot 4 plates and then went on top. And then I started shooting there, and then there was a net in front, because to stop the pigeons from going in. So I shot that shot, and then these people are coming in. So I shot it as out of focus, and I told the guy, just cut that net. And he just said like, no, the focus puller, all local people. He just said, I can't. I just said, okay, give it to me. And so I did one to a nose, look at my and I shot it, and the guys came in. And I said, good, I think we got it. And I turned around, and the guy who she had hired to give us the permission to shoot out here, he was standing right there. And he went like, you give me 1 day notice. You asked for the Hagia Sophia, and blah, 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 blah. And I get you in, and I just went down my knees, and I said, I'm so bloody sorry. All I can tell you is when you're making this film, a devil is in me. I need to make this thing, and I'm so sorry. And then she walked up, and he said, and she took him aside, and they had a word. I had no idea what she said. And then he came back, he said, are we finished? Would you like something else? I said, no. And then I always said, I owe this woman everything. So I said, if I ever come here, I will give her whatever work I can. Then I did some commercial about Islamic architecture, and I think I worked with her once again, and now I've not seen her. So then I called my friend and said, can you give me her number? And I think she will come for the movie today. But she, I think, is not working in the industry anymore, she said. But she is just lovely to me.
It sounds like a typical Turkish story.
Yes, yes, a typical Indian too. You have permission, you go out there and you go like, no, do you know so-and-so saint was here? You're wearing shoes, oh, they throw stones at you, and then, or they will say, oh, welcome, welcome, and you put you on top. You have no idea if you're going to be praised, put on top, or killed. And you just go with that, and then it's just, that's it. So Turkey's India.
Yeah, so, well, we love you here. As you know. So, Now I would like to turn to our audience if they have any questions to ask you.
No statements, ask whatever you want. I have a very foul mouth, I'll try not to stay foul. But ask me anything you want to talk about, I don't have a filter.
Yeah, we have a mic coming up.
They can shout, I can hear them.
I think it's for the recording
Oh,
as well. Yeah.
There's the recording?
So we'll have it on tape. Yeah. The cameras.
Okay, yes. Okay.
Yes. Öner rica ederim. Çok mersi.
There was a Turkish boy that was born. He opened his eyes and turned on the TV and he saw the Pepsi commercial Kung Fu.
Oh, okay.
And that's literally the reason I'm here. I just wanted to say thank you for that. There was that feeling that I've just grown up with, that feeling. How do you tap into that? How to go on with that?
I don't. And I don't really, like a lot of people say the stuff looks spiritual or anything. I just calculate it that this is what will work for this audience. This is what will work internationally. Internationally, you want to do things that are not dialogue based. They're visually based. And the reason I probably figured out now in retrospect, I'm thinking two things that even for the fall, why I think a lot of stuff worked for me is that growing up in Iran, watching television in a language that I don't understand, and then watching a lot of stuff that is all visual for me, and completely misunderstanding the films, which is why The Fall came out, is how I grew up. So as much as the critics hate out there that why is it so visually based, is that I grew up always watching cinema without understanding the language. They were never subtitled, and I would go, do you know a series called Get Smart?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a comedy. But we used to watch it in Iran, and it was dubbed, but there was no subtitles and no laugh track. We didn't know it was a comedy. So I used to watch it about a guy who has a telephone in his shoe whenever he gets trouble, and it's supposed to be a joke. But I used to go and tell that story seriously to my friends, and he's so cool. I mean, if you've seen a Hindi movie, nothing is over the top. So for me, all that worked. So I grew up on that. So when I first came into advertising, I started with The Swimmer, and then I realized that all the creative work was actually much more in Europe, because that time, fortunately for me, now in retrospect I can see that, is that all the countries out here, they used to make different Levi's commercials, everybody used to make a different one, or different Nike commercial for different regions. Suddenly they realized when satellites were in, that they could combine their budget, make one film for all those, so the budget became bigger, but the only prerequisite was that it can't be dialogue based, because they would then dub it. So I was the perfect candidate, because I only thought visually, just because of my background, not for any other thing. And that's what I liked and what I grew up on. So I didn't have to pretend. So in that film, if you remember, there's never a single line. Yeah. So all those things, they worked internationally, and so I got the bigger and bigger budgets because clients were looking to tell a story internationally without dialogue. So Levi's and Nike's and all those particular ones that had the bigger budgets, I got lucky.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you. There is another one. Yeah, Arka.
She has a question too.
You had a question? We don't.
Thank you for coming. I'm a huge fan of your movies. I just want to ask, which of your films changed the most in the editing room in ways you didn't expect?
None of them really. It's kind of like, you know, when you've not been to a place and you go like, when I go out there, it will look like this, it will be like this, it will be like that. And then you go there, it's nothing like that. And yet later on when you remember, you'll think it was exactly how it had to be. So somehow I cannot remember what the original stuff was. With Dear Jassi, when I edited that film myself, is that when I finished, in 48 hours, the film was finished. And I've only taken out one scene since. So I don't like changing too many things later on. And Dear Jassi, there is no coverage. What you get is what you get. Studios don't like that, because if something doesn't work, they would like different angles, they would like to figure that out and go the other way. But when you have complete control and you feel confident enough, you leave it exactly how it is. So I always tell them that I might be wrong, but I'm consistent. I know what I like. So if that works commercially, just like, you know, give me the room. So which one changed the most? Not really. I know that the Cell ending changed for one reason, is that when we left it in the end, hopefully everybody's familiar enough with The Cell, the very ending was supposed to end on his references. that you see that he had a painting of somebody putting out the guts and all that, and somehow he's hodgepodged all this in his head, he's using that as a torture device. That was the ending, and then she leaves. And they just said, like, you can't end on a serial killer, can you do something else? And then somewhere in the middle there was a scene where she goes to the boy and she's about to talk to him, and he, like, somebody goes bzz, and she has to get up and the boy runs away. So I just said, you could take that scene and put it in the end, and then just before the buzz happens, she goes to the boy, and you end the film, it looks like she's broken through. They said, great, and they left. The only thing was I needed a little bit more money because those trees had no flowers, they were dead trees. So, but in her world that I had created when she comes down as Virgin Mary, I just said, when you have those ones, those flowers I could put in post. So I put there that she gets him into her world. So that was changed, just the ending. But when we were shooting the film, my thing was that I wanted Aiko to do the clothes, who I loved and adored. And when she would do the clothes, they were like, oh, you can't, like, they just said, you want somebody like her? I said, no, I want her. If somebody like her, no, I want her. So that was the fight. But when I got her, the kind of clothes they make, I would say they're more opera-based. They're not the other way based, and that's not something Americans like. That's what they told me. They said, like, if you look at Dracula, which is the film that I love, she won the Oscar for it, they were just saying it was literally the only film in America that made 30 million plus the first weekend, but did not make 100 million. That means everybody wanted to see a movie like that, but not that. And they just said because people laugh at the wrong points, they had laughed. I said, okay, so that's because that's a literature piece. This is just a piece of shit serial killer film. If you're going to do this, I will make him so dark that they will not laugh at the bad parts. They said, okay, then and I just said, like, if he comes out in the last act wearing a sari and a wig, they will still not laugh. They said, why? I said, we will just make him dark. And then I had no idea what. And then we were making these really bad lists that he drowns girls, puts them in bleach, masturbates on them, takes his whole thing, pulls that up, and just made him as dark as I could. And when the studio saw it, they were like, whoa, okay, take that out. I said, yes, but if you take that out, the problem is in the third act, they will laugh at him. And they just said, okay, we will try it. So they did 2 screenings, and fortunately for me, the numbers were very good, but the effects weren't finished. So it just looked cheap to people, so the numbers weren't that high. So they said, okay, now let's try taking all the bad part out. And they did. And in the third act, people just started laughing at him because he's wearing such ridiculous clothes. I just said, you have to freak them out. Just say, like, don't laugh at this guy. And you needed that license. So, but hats off to them. And when they saw that, they said, okay, finish your film. But they weren't that confident that it's going to work or be a hit. And then just when Venice came in and all those guys came in and just said, like, you know what, no, we see a very, very clear visual style here, then they were kind of being supportive. So I hope in a roundabout way, I don't like changing that. I have 2 friends who believe in quite the opposite. Fincher, when he makes a film, it's like, if you don't understand it, you're an idiot. So it's okay. So he just leaves it like that. Spike Jonze, and it looks like his film. Spike Jonze will make a movie, he will review it 35, 40 times with people. And he will still take a long time and might take your input, might not, and still his films look like his films. I kind of feel I'm the least successful out of the 2, but I'm in the middle. I like hearing what people are, but only do they understand what I'm trying to say. And if they do, I don't have a chance. So usually I've been correct in telling the story visually, and then I don't try to change it.
I can't thank you enough to spend your time with here. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
The Fall is one of my favorite movies, and when I watched it, when I finished it, I watched it again immediately right after seeing it.
No, and you shouldn't. You should buy another DVD.
And it really makes my life easy because someone asked me about what's your favorite movie, and I'd like to watch it immediately. I'm just suggesting to watch The Fall, and I'm gaining points.
Thank you.
It will be a very cliche and simple and very difficult question, but when you will subscribe to Letterboxd, you have to choose 4 favorite movies.
The Fall.
This may be the case for me, but I would like to learn about your favorite movies. It may change tomorrow, I know, and I learned one is maybe Dracula.
It's not one of my favorite films, but it's a great film.
So I would like to...
that is quite a hard question, and I always like to say that I will go with 1 film per decade that I think came from an area that when I saw it, I went like, like, where did this person come from? like I don't have a standing for them. So I unfortunately, blasphemy, I start films from the 60s. Before that, I'm not that interested in them. So I would say 60s, La Jetée, 70s, I go with The Conversation, and 80s, I go with Blue Velvet, and 90s is Pulp Fiction, and then I think in the next century, I liked Amores Perez, and the last decade, I have not chosen one yet that I think zapped me and made me think like, only because I think, you know, I think the Nobel Prize is more right when they take 10, 15 years before they give you an award. With the Oscars, they'll give you the Oscar, and like 10 years later, those Harvey Weinstein films, you look at, you're just trying to, we gave that thing this. So it's all, you go with whatever, you know, the push comes from the studios and the money and what's contemporary, and they don't date. So I'm sorry to dodge that question, but I can give you the films that I remember. I tried to keep forward. I just said the films that when I saw, I just said like, but what was this person eating? Like, what was he seeing that he sees this film? With some, funny enough, with Pulp Fiction, I feel quite close because he was the guy who wrote it with him, Roger Avery, was a classmate of mine. That when I saw that film, I felt I could understand it because in the Himalayas, when we used to see, when we were in school, we used to get to see one film per weekend. They used to show us one film. But if the film didn't arrive, they had one copy of one film called Get Carter. They would show it to us all the time. But we knew that film so well that sometimes they would put the third reel first, the fourth reel next, and so the movie would start and he's looking for the guy who killed his brother, then his brother would be dead, and then his brother would be alive, and we were all okay because we knew the movie. And with Pulp Fiction, I realized that when I saw that film with the structure, I went like, oh, you went to my school. You must have said so. For me, it literally was like that. But I couldn't see where he came from. The literature that came out of the people's mouths just blew me away. And then also, for each one of those films, when I looked at it, I couldn't breathe.
And I don't want to put in a difficult situation, but
you cannot. Go ahead.
You may have 30 seconds or 1 minute to get an autograph to my favorite movie's Blu-ray cover. Later.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
After the talk. Arkada, sağda hemen.
Give it to her.
Arkada. Önce arkadan kaldırmışlardı.
He was just yawning. He was just.
Hi, thanks for inviting me here. I'm so excited to ask a question.
Go ahead.
This is my first time I watched any of your movie, and
This is the first time I've done anything like this. Right? It's called masterclass. You're telling me?
No, the generic.
Oh yeah, questions I've talked a lot. I think they just Go ahead.
Thank you. So I have two questions about dear Jassi and like you. I write it down. How do you relate to the characters and their struggles on a personal level? And the second one is, were there any characters whose motivation you found particularly compelling or challenging to portray? Thank you.
The first question. I actually, you know what the funny thing is, when I like a particular story, it's horrible. I think of the first scene, and I think of the last scene, and in between I put a film. So for me, it's quite cheap. I do that. In that particular one, once I knew what the opening and the end. The ending I knew was the reason I was making the film, that telephone call. I wanted to finish the film on that. And then the beginning, I didn't have. The moment I can see the first film, I always know that I'm making the film. So in between, the story was quite strong. And I think the writer did a great way of making a structure. Only one character in there is fictional, which is the school teacher, because the guy couldn't read. So to compress the time, he made the school teacher up. So that was one question. What was the other question?
I was asking about
who was difficult? What are the difficult?
Yeah.
Only one scene was difficult, and it was difficult for me, and not difficult for anybody else, because there are people who have not seen the film. There's a really hardcore scene in the end that happens, and the singer is sitting behind me, and this scene is happening here, and it's an 18-minute shot. So when I was going to turn to him, I knew that if he could hear what is happening here, he would not be able to sing, because he's this mystic guy that just does his own thing. You can give him an idea, and so I rehearsed that 18 times during the day, and those people are all theater actors. But the take, I only filmed it once. The sun is coming up. It was a very complicated pan. I mean, like it was a tense shoot, but I could see what the girl will be saying, and how incredibly tough this is going to be. But for the rest of the crew, because the girl is not in the room, they couldn't hear the ending. They could not hear any of that. So when that happened, I just told everybody, go home, because I cannot function today. And so that was a very intense scene. I would say for a person, no, they were all great. And I told them from the very beginning that they were Punjabis, they were from the local areas, and if anything is difficult, it's because I screwed up. You just come in here and tell me this is the situation. How would you do it? And if they couldn't do it, I was pushing them in the wrong direction. So I changed a lot of stuff because none of the dialogue is written. We just had situations.
Thank you. Arkada bir tane daha sorumuz var.
I just want to know, you always, from the start of this, talked about your DNA, you putting your DNA into your movies. But for us, the audience, maybe it's not that easy to detect every time we watch your movie because all your movies are so different from each other. What's your signature? What's your DNA when you watch your movies?
Thank you. I think it's a sensibility, and I used to say that to people in advertising, that I don't care if the commercial is for Nike or a tampon or what. As long as I can see my sensibility in it, I will do it. This was earlier when I was building a career. And I do the same thing in the films. That if I can, I always say your ticket to, because I'm not really, I've never been a believer. So I always say your ticket to immortality is your genes and your memes. Memes meaning something that from 25 years I've been trying to tell my nieces and nephews, please use this word. It means something from the Blind Watchmaker, the Dawkins book. But now it means something completely from TikTok, so it means something completely else. But your ideology, if you can get it across and pass it on, that's your ticket to immortality, or your genes. And my genes, I have a son now, he's a real shithead, so I know he's mine. So I think for me, it's those two things that I try. So if I cannot define it, if I can define that, like this is me, to give it, there's the line that they say, if any philosophy can be put in a nutshell, it belongs there. So for me, I look at this and I just go, I don't know what it is. All I can tell you is I can see me in it. And I don't mean physically, because I'll never be in a film of mine. But I can see how I think. Like the question that you asked about the Cells part. I thought The Cell is a very funny film. And I was just shocked that nobody else found it funny. But now after 15 years when I saw it, I found it emotional for the first time. Because the reason I used to find it funny is that we were just writing these things that, oh, if you're religious, this will freak you out. If you have a son, this will freak you out. We were just writing these and we just calculated it mathematically. And then this time, for the first time, I saw it without the math. And I had empathy for the character, which I've never had before. So I'm just a calculating little bastard. So for me, in that particular one, I was just thinking, and the studio was very against that because they could see it. In the last act, if you've seen The Cell, she comes down and they wanted an action. They said the audience will never forgive you. This guy has done so many cruel things. You want him to get beat up. You want him to, and I just said like, I don't know how to do action in this kind of place. It has to be different. They just said no. So I made this place and I just said, literally I saw it so funny that they let me shoot what I did, which is she comes down as Virgin Mary, pulls his tits out, can't do anything to him, then goes and drowns his inner child. And I was just like, oh, that's hilarious. And that's what we wrote. And they let us shoot it. When people are so traumatized by what this guy is, that they just don't see that the structure of it is highly comedic to me. But this time when I saw it, I believed when I saw the boy's abuse, I was kind of taken for him. And I was on the serial killer's side, not for the murders, but just thinking that, you are, like they say, your character, the reason I have no God is I just say, your character is genotype plus, phenotype. Environment and your genes make your character. So if you can see a person's character, he was abused at a particular age or beaten at a particular age, where it happens, going by the chaos theory, if it happens later on in life, you might survive a rape, but you survive when like at early age, uncle touches you funny and you're traumatized for life. So just all those, if you take into it, you can understand anybody's character. So when I saw that, I fell for the serial killer. And I remember it like a little calculating little thing when we made the movie. So now when I watch it, so I call that my DNA. Just looking at those things and this thing, do I see me in it? And so far, I've not made a movie that I don't see myself in. So when I really run out of money, maybe I'll start making some other shit, but I hope not. because I just think I survived. All my nieces, nephews, everybody's in college and done, and I have enough money to survive until 90, and then I will start doing drugs. So I'm okay.
Thank you so much.
A pleasure.
Burada 2 sorumuz daha var. Şöyle ikinci sırada.
So first of all, I'm very happy to meet you because like The Fall is my favorite movie, and I first ever.
I'm moving to Turkey.
Come.
I first like every friend of mine to watch it and like it. I even forced them to see Dear Jassi today. So thank you for coming here.
I hope you warn them of the drama, but I will warn them.
And my question is like, do you have a moment or a person like you said, okay, this changed my life?
Great question again. Two ways I will answer that. One is the person who changed my life and I was aware of it, and the second person is a school teacher that I had when I went to America, and they get very embarrassed because in India they always tell you when there's a wise old person, they say touch his feet because he's old, and I say I know a lot of people who are old and very stupid, so I never did it just because they're old, and I never did. And the first person's feet that I touched was a teacher that I had in university. He was the films that he showed me. The couple of films that changed my life, I had already seen, but then he was showing them in class. I said he would have been the biggest influencer in my life. Then even literature, he's the guy who introduced me to Borges and everything. So that was one person. His name was JP Goen, and I loved him. So that's my god. So that was JP. And the person I think had the biggest influence on me, we were just talking about him today at breakfast, was probably when there were 15 of us in Delhi University. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I've never tried it, but I will. In 2 years from now, I will drink. I always said around 64, I will try a drink. So I will start in 2 years. But that particular time, all my friends in the university were all doing smack, heroin, blah, blah, and all literature movement because they were all bored, but they were very creative people. I hung out with them all the time. They all wanted to come to America to study film because we all saw the book together, Guide to Filmmaking. None of them got the visa. But because I'd come to England before and gone back, so they looked at that as, okay, he's not going to come here and make the white women pregnant and settle down. So they gave me the visa. So all I can think of is that that person, he was in his late 20s or early 30s, that person without knowing changed my universe, because all my other 15 friends never did anything in film, never did anything. Some of them survived the drugs, some of them didn't. They all went into family businesses or whatever. And all I can think is it was this immigration person that gave me a visa randomly without knowing anything.
Well, visas are a very touchy subject in Turkey as well, so you really touched a nerve there.
Yes, my girlfriend is Iranian. Right now she has such a hard time because, thank God, Turkey is the only place that she doesn't need a visa for. But right now she's trying PR in Canada, and she was supposed to come, but
hopefully next time.
I hope so too. If we are still together, because I'm going to go down and beg her next week. We had a bad fight. Sorry.
Arkaya orada bir şey vardı, sonra öne gelelim.
Did your road ever cross with M. Night Shyamalan's? If it is,
with who?
M. Night Shyamalan.
If it is, how was your companionship? Did my question bring back a memory in your mind?
I've never met him. That was
okay.
So was it a second question? No.
No.
Okay. Yeah, no, I've never met him. I like his films because I think his DNA is in his films. So for me, I always look at that if you come across in your films, you've succeeded. And if you can come across in bigger films as your thing, you've succeeded. That's why when I look at it, I always get shat on the same, because Michael Bay was a classmate of mine also. So whenever I just say Michael Bay is as big an auteur to me as Fincher and Spike Jonze, my friends get really angry. And I tell them no, because all that means is that you're the author of what you've made. Can you see the person in the film? Have you ever seen a Michael Bay film that you couldn't see him in? I can. I hate his films and he hates my films. But I like the guy a lot. I just think he makes the films he wants to make, and he's not faking anybody. And you see a lot of people that want to make a commercial film and it's not in their DNA. And it doesn't work. So for me, the reason I could, a friend of mine was making all the DC films, Zack Snyder, another classmate, and they were saying, talk to him, you can make, I just said, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to fake it. So I'm just making the films that I know. There's an expression that says, if you're going to fight with a pig in mud, just know that the pig actually enjoys it. So if you're trying to fake that, it doesn't work. So Michael Bay loves what he does, and more the hat to him. I like the guy a lot. We just don't like each other's cinema. So, but he's as much an auteur. So for me, M. Night, yes, I see his films, and I just say he's kind of got a Hitchcockian twist that he pays off quite well each time. Good on him.
Arka sırada bir isteyen var da.
It's this here, it's him.
You want it?
Yeah.
It was sort of a follow-up to that, where you talk about David Fincher, Spike Jonze, Mark Romanek. Do you talk about how those relationships over many years of you working together and supporting each other, like the generation before was sort of Coppola, Scorsese, Spielberg.
I'm glad you put us in that group.
Well, Department, they clearly have the same thing, or so it seems. Is that a very supportive relationship? How does it work?
It is. For me, it has been. And the thing is, every time, because I have an advantage that they all don't have, my sisters make curry. So when I go to LA, they all come to my house to eat curry. And we've been hanging out for the last 20 plus years because of that. And then we talk our projects through, we do all of those, and we've been kind of supportive of each other. And then for me, the reason I owe everything to Fincher and Spike, even though that's what they told me, because when the fall, when nobody wanted to buy it, we went to the festival, and there's just 50% of the critics just said it's the really naive piece of shit, and blah blah. Nobody would take it. And then somebody said, well, if you get Spike and Fincher to say that they present the film, you might get a bigger audience. And without blinking, without any pay, without anything, they just saw the film and they just said, yes, whatever you need. And I got their names on that particular one. So for me, they've been very supportive from the beginning. And I used to have this thing where you had to come to my house and you had to bring a film that I wouldn't have seen. So we used to always sit down there. So Fincher would bring something, sometimes Spike would bring, and usually it was me with a film that I would show them and then give them curry. So over time, we used to do that. But now home cinemas have taken over and everybody sees practically everything before they go anywhere. So that was our little get together. And it's been very supportive since. And one time we tried actors coming to the party, and it was a disaster. Because I just think there's a lot of actors that people have had friction with that you don't understand. And then so I just said no actors. These guys, they like to sit down, put their hair down, get drunk. And I am the responsible adult that drives them home if I have to. But so far, never needed to.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, one behind.
Arkada bir tane. En arkada.
The Fall is also one of my favorite movies too.
I love you too.
And
it's my baby.
I watched Dear Jassi a few days ago, and I think both movies have amazing actors and their performances are amazing. So I want to ask how this process works for you, choosing the actors and working with them.
It's in my personal relationships and in my work, I'm a very instinctual person. I think I get it from my mother. That if I look and I just say that's the right thing, then I just come up with a formula that if this is not working, something is wrong with what I'm making them do. So I have that mantra on the set and everywhere. If I'm not in control, it becomes a problem. So I have usually been, especially those two projects, I was in complete control. So whenever something didn't work, I just say, okay, they're right, I've got the wrong thing. I'm trying to put a round thing in a square box. And I would just change things. And in both those films, The Fall completely, I just shot it in sequence. The first time she saw him was the first day she sees him. Second time she saw him, second day she sees him. Third day. In this one, the other one, I did 90% like that too. So when they're non-professional, they can kind of understand where you're going with it and how the relationship is. When Dear Jassi, they fell in love with each other. And then all that friction which studios hate, because by the end, if they suddenly become enemies before the movie finishes, that's a big disaster for them. So for me, I just said, go however you want. In The Fall, we ended up with a girl, the first day she showed up and her front 2 teeth were missing. And you would be dead if you were a studio film and going front and back, because you would have to put the teeth in CGI and not in CGI. So in The Fall, I just said, oh, no, it's great. So she would do that, and I just wrote dialogue in there that, her strength was in the teeth. And then when the mystic dies, we just had his teeth come out, and suddenly he's got no strength. So all that was just something I would just see and leave it open. So for me, in both those incidents that you chose, I kind of had complete control, but the actors were the right people. So whenever they were not, I would have switched. So when we couldn't get the visa for the little girl, Katinka, who now I met recently, I call her my Russian tank, and she's this big girl now, a little girl from The Fall. And she always said, no, Romanian tank. So, because she's Romanian, she smokes like a Turk. She smokes like a chimney in bloody this thing, as she's in London, and her favorite hobby is pole dancing. So what do I tell you? I don't know. So where the life is going, she works in a writing company called Waterson. So she's quite literary, and she's really a big girl, and she loves pole dancing. So I don't know. I just instinctually felt that this was the right person. I would love it for it to have been one of my nieces or nephews. I always say, when there is no money and it's a real personal project, use your family, because you can abuse them and hit them and it just nothing happens. But when it's other people's children, it becomes very complicated. So with The Fall, it's more complex. But in this one, they were adults. But I just think, like for this day, I think this is what he meant. But Ford's line is that a director he just says, just tell people how fast to speak. That's all. But I think he means the tone of the film comes from the director. So I always look at those particular ones and I just say, if in acting, I think for film, the directing comes from coverage. I'm saying coverage cheaply, blocking a scene. Where you put your cameras is where my DNA comes from. If it's this, we'll cut to this, and that's why if you're an editor, you will probably be the best director that can be, because you know what cuts with cut. And whenever editors tend to become directors, they have a completely different style. From Scorsese coming from cutting documentaries, and then you look at Raging Bull, no editor would have told you that if there's a fight, you suddenly cut to a chair coming and you come in there. It's just, the guy has cut films. So I would just say, I meandered, but hopefully I answered your question somewhere and I lost my chain of thought. So, yeah, the actors were great. So if you can get the right people in, mostly you need to get out of their way, because the magic will happen in front of you. But if there's a studio and telling you, get this coverage, get that coverage, it's tough. I don't know how to help. And I just was such a drama queen in the beginning. That's why the studios don't really, now when they make the kind of films, where I just think, it's a really horrible line that Mark Romanek told me that they use when they do the films, is what they prefer. They have these films that now come out that do really well. They're called director proof. That even a director cannot screw it up. So they try to get a good script, and they get somebody who cannot, for a certain extent, let's say, kidnap the process. So if you put a Terry Gilliam in there, it could be a masterpiece or an absolute piece of shit. They cannot afford that. They will get somebody who follows the dots and get there because they want to be responsible for the money. It was probably a natural evolution. It was going to happen anyway, and that is what happened. But if you're doing personal films, then I always say my coffee will be black. But if it is, like $70–80 million and a studio is involved, I allow them to put a little milk in my coffee. So it's okay. So how much milk is up to you and on the budget and what leverage you have. You see Fincher, and he still doesn't let them put any milk. $100 million, keep your milk. So he can afford to do that. I can't. And I just say there's aspiring filmmakers here or something like that. Just try to find out if your DNA works in there, and also if it's commercial enough. I remember when I did the first films, I was just thinking, if this doesn't work, yeah, I know how to copy other people. I probably might do that. But fortunately for me, I never needed money. I never had money. I was doing 4 jobs. My brother was working as a janitor to put me through college. My girlfriend was bussing tables, but I've never needed money. And then suddenly I had a lot, and I just don't even know what to do with it. So I just put it into education and put it in this little film called The Fall, and it all went away again. So I just think, try to get your DNA out there, unless you just want to have children, which is also okay. That's your ticket to immortality.
Okay. So, well, thank you so much.
Come to Dear Jassi if you can. Yes, I'm sure, like they say, it'll all be empty. Come and see it. And
if you're there, we'll be there to present the film and then have a Q&A after the screening. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.